Welcome to Dear Diaspora, a podcast celebrating the African diaspora and the changemakers, innovators, and entrepreneurs working to make our world a better one to live in. I'm your host, Ndulwa Kowa. Let's get started. Welcome to season 3 of the show. I am so excited to be back with brand new episodes of Dear Diaspora. If you are a new listener, thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy the content and the episodes. And be sure to follow the podcast on social media at Dear Diaspora for daily updates and inspirational content. For today's episode, I had the pleasure of interviewing Lukonga Lindunda. He is the co-founder and executive director of Bongo Hive, an award-winning innovation hub in my hometown, Lusaka, Zambia. Bongo Hive is changing the landscape in the region, and it was so wonderful to get to know Lukonga better, learn more about the tech and innovation space in Zambia, and what the country is doing right in regard to supporting entrepreneurship. I cannot wait for y'all to listen to this episode, but before I do that, I have some special announcements to make. Dear Diaspora is now on Patreon. If you haven't heard of Patreon, it's a platform that allows you to support podcasts like mine and your favorite content creators and get exclusive access to bonus content. You can become a supporter of the show for as little as $1 a month, and that gets you access to exclusive bonus episodes, video interviews, podcast merchandise, invitations to be a guest contributor or collaborator, episode shoutouts, and much more. Please visit patreon.com/Dear Diaspora to learn more and become a Dear Diaspora patron today. So, as most of you may know, I have dreams of traveling across the African continent, doing business there, and contributing to Africa's growth and development in some way. That's why I'm so excited to be heading to Ghana this December with Certified Africa. Certified Africa isn't just another travel and tour company. Traveling with them connects you to movers and shakers on the continent, meaningful cultural experiences, and opportunities to network with entrepreneurs on the ground. There are just a few spots left for their New Year's Eve in the motherland Beyond the Return experience this December, and I really hope you can join us. Check out the show notes for more information, and don't forget that you can use discount code Dear Diaspora for 10% off the entire trip. All right, so back to the show. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Lukonga Lindunda, the co-founder of Bongo Hive. Awesome. Lukonga, thank you so much for being a guest on Dear Diaspora. I'm so excited to have you.
It's a pleasure to be on the show. I'm looking forward to an amazing conversation.
Same here. Let's get started by just getting to know you a little bit better. Could you tell us where you're from and where you grew up?
So I was born in Dola many years ago. I'm 37. I was born and raised there. I went to schools there, and then eventually had a chance to move away from Dola. Did my schooling in South Africa, and then when I came back, eventually moved to Lusaka. But yeah, I grew up in Dola, and it's an amazing city. I still go back there once in a while. Very different from Lusaka, where I am now. But it's always interesting when I go back and I can remember so many things. And the city hasn't changed much, but lots of opportunities still there. And I always think about how, even in the line of work that we do, that we can still do stuff in Dola. Yeah, but that's where I'm from.
Awesome. And could you share a bit more about your experience going to school in South Africa? I saw that you went to the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University and then ALU in South Africa as well.
Yeah, so when I finished high school, and we always joke about this at home with my parents, that when the opportunity came up to go to university, I was supposed to go to University of Zambia, and I had the option of going to the Copperbelt University. But then my sister was in South Africa, and then the idea of going to study there basically came up, and my parents were like, "Yeah, sure, let's see if you can go." And then because my dad had just retired for the second time, it was like an opportunity to spend his money. So he's basically used all his money, all his retirement money on my education. But it was a really great experience. Being in South Africa, and the university as well also went through lots of changes, being a historically white university, and then moving towards a black merging with other historically black universities. So there was interesting time with changes. Initially, it was called University of Port Elizabeth, and then it changed to Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University because Nelson Mandela was born in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, and then eventually they renamed it to Nelson Mandela University, which is a great opportunity. I studied information systems there, and really one of the safest and quietest cities in amongst the top cities in South Africa, and eventually came back here. The ALU MBA was an opportunity that came up. Actually got a scholarship, chairman scholarship, to study there, and because of COVID, couldn't start in March this year. Actually, the Rwanda went into lockdown a week, I think, just a week, the same week that we were supposed to be in residential in Kigali, and it was moved to October. So I haven't yet started. I'm starting in October. And again, looking forward again to interact with many other Africans that are trying to make a change on the continent in the ALU MBA program.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's sounds like it's going to be a really interesting experience in Kigali. I look forward to hopefully, just learning more about what that's like for you. So, what would you say sparked your interest in technology? Like when you were in high school, did you know like, okay, I'm going to study information systems?
Yeah. When I can remember the time when I really got interested in tech. So my mom used to work for Colgate, Palmolive back in the day, and at one point in time she got a second-hand computer from the office. So they were getting rid of their computers. So she brought in a second-hand computer in the mid '90s, I think, if I remember correctly. I was still in high school, and Windows 95 Compact Presario, and it was a great opportunity to just play around with it. I don't recall how many times I actually installed the operating system and reinstalled and opened it up, but it was a great experience just playing with the hardware and with the software as well, and just seeing what was possible. And at the same time, uh, I don't know how much you know about how much information we had back in the day in Zambia in the 90s, where we only had one TV station. And so CNN used to come on the same TV station for a period of time, I think a couple of programs. And there was a tech program on CNN. And each time that program would come up, there would always be cool stuff that they would be talking about. And I always wondered to myself what it would take to do the same things that they were doing on the show, or whatever technology they were profiling on the show. And by the time I finished high school, I basically had an option. I was really good at accounting, so I thought maybe I would become an accountant. And then when I went to university, there was an option to actually do accounting and technology at the same time. And I decided it would take too long, so I just focused on technology. But that initial interest was really sparked by having a computer in the house and also watching content on TV, which almost made the technology come to life, showed examples, and I thought to myself, hey, why not pursue this? And I remember back in the day, there were not many people that were as interested as they are now in technology. And I think moving to South Africa as well to study there was really helpful in being able to tap into new spaces where people were a bit more progressive than they were in Zambia at that time. And and the story goes on. Yeah.
Wow. After, getting your degree, did you immediately return to Zambia at that point, or did you spend some more time in South Africa?
I would have loved to stick around a bit more, but I felt like I had obligations back home, and I usually laugh with my wife that, and we were dating at that time. I told her that I came back all the way from South Africa because I wanted to marry her. Um, but one of the reasons as well was I actually wanted to look. I wanted to work. I wanted to find a job. I wanted to settle down. More school. Didn't really feel like the best thing to do. But I had tried as well to study further, but it just didn't work out, and that's how I ended up coming back to Zambia. And also, if you consider the laws, labor laws or employment laws in South Africa, they aren't and they weren't as open to non-South Africans working, finding jobs there. So it just felt like coming back to Zambia made more sense at that time. Yeah.
Wow. And so that was the early 2000s. What was it like for you job searching and kind of finding those first few opportunities after graduating?
That experience is much of that is what also influenced the start of Bongo Hive and what we do now. I remember coming back, being at home, sending applications, and no one really responding. I remember at one point I had to settle for. I think the first three jobs I had were really different from what I had studied. First one, I got a sales job with a company called Dove Computing in Kitwe. I literally worked there for 1 week. I was staying in Dola, and I would get on a bus 45 minutes, get into Kitwe and go and sell software on the streets of Kitwe. And that was a payroll software that actually the first Zambian payroll software, if I remember correctly, on CDs. Yeah, and then we would go around visiting different companies and selling them the software on the CDs. I worked there for 1 week. After that, they were like, we think that you are overqualified for this. And I remember I'd already bought clothes and ties, and my parents were like, "Yeah, our son's finally gotten a job." And 1 week later, they were like, no, we don't think that this job is for you, and we think that there's more opportunity for you." I've never really quite understood why they told me that, but anyway, after a week, I was jobless, and it went on like that for a few months, and really the story for in finding jobs at that time and finding a job was that there were not enough jobs on the market, especially for people who were qualified software engineers or IT people. Lots of opportunities in networking, which is making sure that there's a local area network and internet in the building, but not for people who were really skilled or had expertise in building software platforms or web platforms. And this was back in 2005, 2006. And literally, if you wanted a good job, you would have to work in the bank. Besides that, there
Wow.
were really small companies that were trying to get into the software space. And it went on for like 2, 3 years. I remember my next job was a graphic designer. Then after that, I eventually landed a job as a sort of a systems analyst for a really small startup. And those 3 years really taught me a lot about what a lot of young people are going through right now. Right, you have the skills, you have the papers, the qualifications, but the job market isn't as open. And really, as I got more experience and got better jobs, eventually when the idea of Bongo Hive came up, those are some of the experiences that have taught us to either create more opportunities for young people in the local market, or give them the skills that are relevant to the local and international and global job market, so that we see that young people get jobs. Young people are meaningful to society. They're impactful in whatever they do. But those first 3 years were tough, and a lot of people have the same challenges. Whether you studied here or you studied outside the country, or whether you have a master's degree or you don't have any paperwork, it's not as easy as it should be, and that's just how it is. Yeah.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. And so then you and a few colleagues, you got together and then you started Bongo Hive. Could you first tell us what Bongo Hive is and what you guys do? And then I'd love to just kind of hear just the story of, like, those first few moments that led to the launch.
So, Bongo Hive itself is made up of two words. The first one is Bongo. It's a sort of a Bantu word that means brain. Wongo, 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 and the other part, hive, comes from beehive. So we see ourselves an organization that works with uh, bees, people, who are producing sweet stuff. Right. So the concept of the beehive, that is collaboration in that, and that there's actual goal as well in that. There's production of honey. And we see Bongo Hive as a physical space and also the virtual space where there's a meeting of minds. And these minds work together in creating some impact, whichever way that is. And we like to sum it up by saying we work with great minds building viable solutions that change the world. And we've been around for about 9 years now. And when I go back to the time we started around 2011, on the continent, what was happening in Zambia was there was a huge opportunity for mobile technologies on the continent. I remember back in the day there was lots of content. I remember even The Economist, I think Times, the Time magazine and others, talking about Africa being a mobile first continent, and also talking about the proliferation of mobile devices on the continent, literally saying that most people on the continent, I remember Prakel's nice statement that most people on the continent were never going to use a computer, they were going to use a mobile device. And so when you look back 2011, and my own experience, by that time I was working for a non-profit, and we are 4 founders of Bongo Hive. In 2011, I was working for a non-profit together with my other co-founder, Bart. And our background at that time, we were working in the technology space and education. So my role within that organization was to see how we could leverage technology to improve the quality of education. And had been doing that for like 3, 4, 5 years actually. And so when it was time in 2011 to think through what kind of approaches would really create impact in Zambia and the rest of the continent, we came across the model of a hub, that it was possible to get brilliant minds and startups in a physical space, provide them with the networks, the infrastructure, the training, and that potentially they could start startups or solve problems that were relevant. And the background, of course, is because we had, Bart and I had been working in the nonprofit space for a while. There was really frustration with the fact that sometimes you could do so much work, but things were not as sustainable as they should be. So we thought maybe if we came up with a hub, we could have local people coming up with ideas and leveraging on the resource provided by the nonprofit that we're working for. And so we fast-tracked that whole conversation by involving Sulumesi and Simunza, who are the other co-founders who were already active in the tech scene. Simunza was already involved with Barcamp and TEDx, and he knew quite a lot of people in that space. And we ended up meeting at events, and we got talking about what we could do differently, because we all had, as founders, all had experience working, studying outside Zambia, and then we came back and we're like, hey, how can we create an environment where more people like us and more people unlike us would really find opportunities to collaborate. So the idea of a hub came out because of our own frustrations, not having a space or a network where we could really build stuff together. And I like to say stuff because at that point in time, it wasn't really about building unicorns and all those things. It was just, how do you create an environment where we are talking the same language, networking and collaborating one way or another. And so the concept of Bongo Hive was birthed in May 2011 when we had our first meetup. By that time, the name wasn't even there. It was basically just us meeting together. We had the opportunity at my former workplace of having a couple of interns that we got from 2 colleges here. And our interactions with those interns really opened our minds because, like I was saying, one of the questions I had, challenges I had when I came back, was finding jobs. And these interns were right in the building, and I could see that the what they had learned in college wasn't as wasn't a fit for the market. And we took that opportunity to then start Bongo Hive, because we thought to ourselves, hey, we are having these experiences in our work environments. We are here as people who have some level of exposure. We have the resource that we have the young people here. We have the physical space that we have a room at the Ministry of Education. So we thought to ourselves, hey, let's just start, right? So nothing to do with fundraising, nothing to do with nice big logo, nice big launch. I was just, hey guys, let's start. And that's how in May 2011, literally we had our first meetup. And every 2 weeks, we'd basically call people call guys who were in this space, or people who were in this space, to tell their friends to come to Bongo Hive. And if they found the content relevant, and at that time, really, we were doing just very tech-oriented training. I remember my colleague, my fellow co-founder, Silumesi, was training on Ruby on Rails. And it was very technical because the founders themselves, we have a technology background, IT background. And so for the first few months, we were focused on training because we thought to ourselves that the real lack at that time was just having the expertise to build stuff. And when I talk about building in software terms, it's just being able to either build websites, build apps, but build with a world-class approach. And so by mid 2011, we had come up with the name Bongo Hive. And one of the most important things that motivated us, remember I was talking about the mobile growth on the continent, is Simunza and I were at an event, and someone asked, how many of you know Android? And literally from a group of about 40, there were about five of us who knew what Android was. And we were at the University of Zambia. And Simunza and I got talking after the event for like 2 hours. We're like, how can this be? This is 2011, and we are at the highest institution of learning in this country, and most of these students don't know what Android is. And so that really motivated us to do something. And by doing something, we just, like I said, we just started. And by the end of the year, we had organized the first app training, mobile app training, and we had about 30 people in the room, and really that kick-started our activities at another level. It wasn't just young people meeting in the room, but now we're having solid training that was focused on solving problems that young people were experiencing. And Moving forward from that, what happened then is as we experienced more challenges in the local market, as we experienced more gaps, we then would take on those gaps and create the programs, activities, and platforms to ensure that we filled up every gap. And I'll go on to explain some of the gaps we experienced. But really, when we go back to why we started Bongo Hive, it's because we experienced a need, a gap, and we decided that we were going to do something about it, and then we just did it. And incrementally, we've been able to build an organization over 9 years. But when you go back in time, it's really doing something about a problem that we ourselves were facing.
Well, thank you so much for providing that, context and just sharing more about the story and those early days. It's really incredible what you guys have been able to do, and the fact that you guys are filling such a significant gap. It's just so important. And what are some of the biggest lessons that you've learned just navigating ecosystem building in Zambia? What are some of your challenges, or just what have you kind of learned these past 9 years?
It's been an incredible 9 years, and some of the things that we had in mind 9 years ago have changed over time. If you noticed, my last answer was focused a lot on training and apps. And one of the first things we had a challenge with was it's great actually to talk about apps and all those things, but apps are not businesses. And that realization came early on. And it was great that we had to go through the whole process, because it's not just us who were talking about it, right? It's the whole continent. And I remember that time, the conversation would be, if you create an app, a million people download your app and you sell it for $1 each, you can become $1 million. You can become $1 million richer, and those were simplistic terms that we used to hear, and we got to realize that to build a business required you to know more than just the technology. In fact, that the technology needed to even, in some cases, come much further up down the process of starting a business, right? But when we started to focus on the ecosystem, right, and some of these terms are quite fancy, but there is a reason why we have a specific focus on the ecosystem, because the entrepreneurs themselves can't exist without the ecosystem. And so one of the lessons that we've learned over time is that relationships are important, right? Now, relationships within the community. So when I talk about the community, I basically mean the entrepreneurship or technology community that we are in. That we needed to create the right relationships, right? If there were technology guys, coders, for example, they needed to understand that they are not the most important people in the room, right? And that if you had an idea but maybe didn't understand the technology, maybe for you need to partner with someone else who understands the technology. So those relationships between the various stakeholders in the ecosystem are really important, because for people to build businesses, and we've had nice examples across the globe. I mean, your cliche companies, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, when you talk about the partnerships that the founders had in the beginning, that's what I like to refer to as the relationships that we need to create. If people didn't have that approach before, that when Bongo Hive came through, we now started to push the aspect of people building relationships and building partnerships amongst themselves, because that was the only way. That is the only way, one of the most profound ways of really building scalable businesses, when you can have people coming in and providing different expertise and coming together to build a business that has a higher chance of succeeding. From those relationships to a much higher level, um, the pipeline approach is very important. So some of the biggest lessons we've learned over the years is that you can't assume that when someone enters into Bongo Hive, they will have an amazing idea, that they will have a growth mindset, that they will have the networks and the connections that they need to thrive. And these assumptions are what we've had to deal with over the years. And that means, from a lesson perspective, that there is need to work at various stages. So for the kids, there needs to be a specific focus on them that is much more strategic, more long term, because these are the people. If you can expose these kids, 5, 10-year-old kids, to an environment that helps them to fail fast, to um, uh, experiment with technologies, you can imagine what impact that has when they're 10, 15, 20 years older. It means that the ideas that they'll come up with, the businesses that will come up with, will be so different from the ideas that someone who may have learned technology, may have learned to fail when they are 25 or 30. There's just something about working with younger people and working on their mindset when they're younger, that over time it changes a lot of how they perceive of opportunities in the market, how they perceive of problems, how they're able to start businesses. So I think one of the biggest lessons as well, that we've learned navigating the ecosystem in Zambia is that there are gaps. So you can make your assumptions about the education system at different levels, about the funding mechanisms available, about the policy areas, but there are gaps. And then it brings you to a place where you know that if no one else does it, someone has to do it. And if no one then does it, then eventually we have to do it as Bongo Hive, or we have to support someone else who's doing it. So again, the relationships are important at institutional level, because the silos that have existed over the years have disadvantaged entrepreneurs and the ecosystem. So the relationships that we can build as stakeholders across, and we're talking about funders, we're talking about policymakers, hubs, and all sorts of other academia and others, those are really, really important. We're not there yet, but recognizing that the silos are there has been a very important step. And then secondly, being able to build partnerships. We have over 24 partnerships now that we have built. That's been a consequence of learning that the gaps are there, but we need to build the partnerships that will enable our innovators and entrepreneurs to start having ideas, to have those ideas, to scale those businesses, because we have reduced some of the barriers that they would have experienced if the relationships between the institutions didn't exist. So working in an ecosystem level and breaking it down to the pipeline that's necessary to get someone from, I don't have an idea, to now I have an idea, I have a business, I need to scale my business. Having that approach has been very useful for us, and that's why I think that we've been effective.
So I would love to hear more about these partners that you've been able to work with and collaborate with these past 9 years, and specifically the Zambian organizations that kind of have, stepped up and said, this is really important. Have any of the partnerships surprised you? I didn't think this, organization or agency would be open to collaborating, or has it been pretty much, have people been pretty open and receptive to the work that you guys are doing?
Initially, we had a lot of non-Zambians involved because they caught on very easily. So, in the early instances, we had international organizations and corporations supporting us. Then quite Recently now we've had more local corporates and government institutions and all that. So we have a wide range of partnerships. I can name a few. For example, we have one with the Zambia ICT Authority, the ICT regulator. We have a partnership with the National Technology and Business Council Center, which is a government entity that focuses on innovation. And in the private sector as well, we have one of the leading law firms, two of the largest internet service providers in the country that provide internet into the space. And I could go on and on talking about the different types of institutions that we have partnered with locally to basically fill the gaps that we experience. And I know you've been exposed to this innovation space quite a bit. You will notice that for us to do the work that we do, I don't need to be a lawyer. I just need to partner with a law firm that sees the opportunity to work with young entrepreneurs and sees the potential to work and unlock the value that is in these entrepreneurs, what they will become in 5, 10, and 20 years. And so the partnerships that we have built more recently have been very targeted at the support that they can provide to the entrepreneurs. So whether it's in providing high-speed internet or legal advice or financial advice, they're very important in providing contextual knowledge about doing business in Zambia.
And so I had a question for you just about just generally the kind of support entrepreneurs can find in Zambia. Like, what would you say Zambia does really well regarding entrepreneurship support?
Very, very good question. I think that one of the good things that we do, and for people that are sort of comparing us to a couple of other countries on the continent, particularly what we do at Bongo Hive, I think for us, what separates us from a lot of other hubs support networks is that we run programs, right? And by programs, the programs that we have defined and designed are very specific to different stages of a business. So have an idea, or whether you are a high growth startup, or whether you're a small and growing business, we have very specific programs that target very specific stages, which I find quite unique to our approach. That a lot of the other hubs and entrepreneurship support organizations on the continent haven't necessarily structured their programs in such a way. Because we have fewer players, the potential to have less silos and more integration and collaboration is much higher. Just last week, we had interest from a government institution to work on a proposal with a large non-profit, but also including another government agency and us as private sector. So that kind of approach is rare, and I think it is something that we need to applaud. I know a lot of people want to complain about things not working in Zambia, but when you see ecosystem players working together on things like proposals, things that will improve the local ecosystem, and not just, I'm not so much a fan of creating associations because you need to get the job done, but when you can get existing institutions that can, within the scope of what they do, realize the value that they can add to the ecosystem, and realize that they can't do it alone, and then they go to another institution and see how they can work together. I find that's it's not common on the continent and a lot of places, and I'm seeing that happen a lot more now, and that is very, very good. Of course, there will be challenges, which I think you will ask a little later, but I love that we can work together. I think that's a very important point, and it's not a common thing in other ecosystems.
Yes. So my next question is, what role can the Zambian diaspora play in supporting entrepreneurs in Zambia?
So one of or two things I think in this case, with the experience that people in the diaspora have, I do think that they can be active mentors to the businesses or the startups that are available here. And also, I think the access to funding, I do understand that in some countries you can really get access to very low interest funding. And when you look at the local context where you have, I mean, 20, 30, 35% interest rates, it's
Wow.
impossible. Yeah, it's impossible to really use that kind of funding to fund your business. And when I like earlier when I talked about the multi-stage funding, you can literally take out any funding from institutions or banks, particularly. And so the access that people in the diaspora have to funding sources, I think, can bridge that gap. The only issue there, of course, that you have to address is the risk profile. So, do you work with an entrepreneur directly, or you work through an institution like Bongo Hive that de-risks the startups? And we've seen some of the Zambians actually take up such opportunities. One good example is Zenga Ventures, which is a number of Zambians in the UK and America that came together, put together an investment fund that eventually invested in two startups that came through our programs. That kind of approach, I think, is really effective, and so it comes down to the institutional partnerships that we can create, so that if you are sitting in the UK or in the US or Japan, you know that there's an institution in Zambia called Bongo Hive that works with businesses and can help you make the right decisions. And one of the things there, especially with COVID and the way that it's helping us to leverage on technology, the opportunity there is that some of these interactions that previously you couldn't have, now they are much easier. So getting startups here to get on calls, video calls with you as a mentor or an investor in any part of the world is certainly much easier. And so the opportunity to leverage on tech to still be effective in Zambia, being involved with startups and all those things, I think it's there. And so being able to be mentors, providing access to and by mentors, it could be technical expertise as well, and then being able to provide low cost funding to some of these businesses. I think those are the two very real opportunities for people in the diaspora.
And what would you say excites you about Africa's future and maybe even specifically Zambia's future?
There's a lot of excitement, and I think I was on a call there the other week. I was talking about how it's not that there's been a lack of excitement. I think that in the 60s when we were getting independence, there was also a lot of optimism and excitement that we were free, and that unlocked a lot of opportunities, right? Now there's sort of more excitement about people living their dream, and doing this by creating their own opportunities. So now it does. I can sense that more young Africans see the opportunity to and the reality of actually starting really effective, impactful, and successful businesses that not only focus on Africa itself, but focus on the world. So that is what really excites me, that it's not just about ourselves anymore. I think meeting really optimistic young people in our work, you get the sense that the horizon is now much bigger. People are thinking much bigger than just how do I change my natural environment where I live now in Lusaka, Zambia, but really how do I become an effective global citizen? And that's really important for us as Africans at this point, because previously when we were thinking of ourselves as being free, as sort of free from oppression, now we have people who may not have lived in that oppressive environment, now sort of economic oppression, but they see entrepreneurship and innovation as a real enabler that levels the playing field, and people can really think big and be able to start businesses that create jobs, create impact, and also create wealth for people. So I'm excited about that, both for us as Zambians and also generally on the continent of Africa, that we are unlocking opportunities and we are doing more, not just for Africa itself, but also for the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for speaking to that and sharing what excites you about the future. It's really an exciting time, I would say. And I'm definitely just thankful for the type of work that you guys are doing to kind of lead that and connect, young people to, opportunities. And I just can't wait to see what you guys do next. And I look forward to supporting and hopefully spotlighting your work even more. So thank you for that, Lukonga.
Indeed. Yeah, it's been a good opportunity to have a chat with you. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing how more people, how we can collaborate with more people and provide opportunities for other Zambians out there in the diaspora. So I'm available. People can reach out to me. On Facebook and other platforms, on Twitter. Twitter handle is Lukonga. But if you want to reach out to via Bongo Hive on Twitter, Facebook, it's Bongo Hive. But also our website is www.bongohive.co.zm, and you can catch us there as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that information. I will be sure to link to it in all the notes and the descriptions. Thank you so much again for being a guest on the show. I really enjoyed this conversation.
I enjoyed it too. Thanks.
Thanks for listening. I hope y'all enjoyed that episode. If you'd like to keep up with Bongo Hive, be sure to visit their website and follow them on social media. Check out the show notes for more details about where you can find them online. And don't forget, there's a new way to support the show. You can become a patron by visiting patreon.com/DearDiaspora. So for as little as $1 a month, you get exclusive access to bonus content, bonus episodes, video interviews, and much more. And shout out to the first 2 patrons of Dear Diaspora, Joe Coldenice and Christine Juma. Thank you all for supporting the show. It means so much. Talk to you all next week.